further ado, Kaila, all over to you. And yeah, I will let you introduce yourself. Thank you.
Brilliant. So hi everyone, and happy Saturday. I hope you're enjoying the lovely weather and managing to join us while still enjoying the sunshine outside. So my name's Kaila Bloomfield and I work for Microsoft as a partner technical architect. And what that means is I'm supporting our partners and also trying to support in the community for anything from directions to go with implementations and products and services to really helping you guys just get that extra bit of connection to Microsoft, because I came from partner side last year and sometimes I think we can be a little bit of a closed world when you don't know who to ask or who to talk to. So one of my mini missions since I've joined is to try and reopen those doors of engagement. So I'm covering off the e-commerce topic today because it's quite a new product. And I think when we joined, Microsoft openly admits a little bit we probably could have done a bit of an easier job to help get everyone onboarded to what it is. So what I wanted to cover off today is talking about what e-commerce is, the difference it makes to your commercial retail implementation. So is a a huge difference on how you should go about it, and also how the tool works and what benefits it can ultimately bring, because we want you guys to be able to use it. We want you guys to be able to get excited by it and sell it. So if you do ever want to contact me, because I do try and always reply the same day, it's jump on Twitter or jump on LinkedIn, let me know, and I'll try and help if I can, and if I can't, I'll find someone who can, and just say hi, because I'm chatty as anything and I don't stop talking. So be warned, you've got 45 minutes of this. I'm going to go over the architecture just so you can understand how it all links together, and also how we support it after you get your customers live. Then actually, like I said, the implementation journey and how it works. And then we're going to jump straight into a demo and really just focus on, well, do you know what on earth is it? So for the e-commerce overview, I want to break it right down. So for the first step, we can talk about just the architecture. And I'm going to try and make this non-technical for everyone who knows and uses the system today, because very often techies and then everyone else, we talk French and everyone else talks lovely English. So I'm trying to not do that. If anyone has any questions, feel free to come off mute and just ask it. It's much better to have a two-way conversation during these things. So ultimately what you have, and also how we support, you have lifecycle services. We know that you don't have to worry about lifecycle services either. We update that and we do that automatically. No one has to worry, but it is the hub for environment management today for commerce and e-commerce. So when you're talking about e-commerce and your implementations, actually, I'll show you the difference that you see in LCS in the live demo between the two. You have your HQ. Now, this is identical to what you always knew about retail. There's no difference here in the sense that one version exists and you can pause free versions and you can manage that yourself or leave it to auto update. But then we start going into what's changed, and this is now the new world. So you have the POS and in-store components. There's been a lot of enhancements in here to try and make them more usable, more supportable, and also more capable to be managed updates on your devices and things like that. So really have a look, because we're ultimately trying to make this easier for organizations to manage their POS systems and also reduce any impact you have on the device setup and hardware. So you can manage from each device independently updates, or also you can push out those updates to specific stores and things like that. Now we come into what we need for e-commerce. So what you have is the commerce scale unit, and this is basically, for anyone who knows the old school finance, or this is what the same as the sort of AOS server. It's your core processing engine. And what's key about this for your customers, this is where you want to focus on. If they're a really big customer, you can get additional commerce scale units. The more you have, obviously, the busier the customer, the more transactions. Commerce scale units, you always will have one online. The whole point is they will all stay online. They will always stay available, because you need them to help all of these different components we're talking about now talk to each other. So these are really key. And what ultimately happens in your production environment, you will always have more than one commerce scale unit, and you update them independently. We're also moving them to auto update, and I'm pretty sure the last time I asked, which is probably about a week ago, it's not there yet. But, you know, this is on teetering edge. We're going to roll that in. So basically, when you roll in your update for your HQ, that will automatically update your commerce scale unit. And a key thing to know about your commerce scale unit, actually, it's forward and backward version compatible. So what you've got to think is, well, my in-store, my customers, my shop front ends, they are not going to want to update these instances on a monthly basis. Actually, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, I think you can get 9 versions behind on your front end POS systems, and your commerce scale unit doesn't care. So you can keep your HQ up to date, your commerce up to date for your scale unit, but your front end POS systems, your in-store components, you don't have to worry about them as much. You can keep them a bit more static to reduce impact for your customers. Then what you have behind that is all of our AI, so our customer insights, our fraud protection. You guys don't have to worry about any of that. We sort all of that out. And also e-commerce. So when we talk about e-commerce and websites, the biggest fear everyone has is, well, your HQ, you have downtime. Well, e-commerce doesn't have that. You know, this is zero downtime. We manage the updates, we keep it going, we make sure you have all of the versions, all the components as and when you need it and as we release them. And you don't actually have to worry about it. We'll obviously let you know what changes are going on, but that's just sorted for you. Very similar to lifecycle services, very similar to customer insights, to fraud protection. You don't have to consciously be aware of that. So when we go to implementation journeys and we start thinking about, everyone knows how you're going to implement HQ, right? Everyone knows how to implement retail. It's no different than, to be honest, for the most part, if you implement finance or supply chain or project operations. You do your initial initiation, you get your licenses set up, you get that core, you know, information from your customers. You start doing your configuration, your implementation of your environments and your versions. Then you do your testing, you get ready for go live, you do data migration, and then you go live. So you're done. But actually, that was all the world we knew. That's what we've all done, to be honest, quite a few times, or you know, it's a very well-trodden journey. So a lot of questions we get is, well, what's the difference? What does e-commerce do how does it impact our implementation? Well, this is the answer. Some of you probably don't even think I've turned the slide over. There is no difference. So what we have, and there are a variety of tools and conversations, when you're going for e-commerce, there's no impact to your high level journey. The project structure, the things you do, they're the same. There are 1 or 2 quirks, I suppose, things that you have to be aware of. You have to be a bit more conscious of certain data sets, because, you know, when you're doing all of your product setup and how you're configuring that hierarchy, that's going to map directly to what your front end e-commerce site looks like. So you do have to be more careful and conscious in certain areas of your implementation. And you have to be a bit more aware of how those integrations are going to work and where that data starts and finishes. But ultimately, the journey you take, what you're used to, your sort of bread and butter of the world, that doesn't actually change. And when it comes to your migration between environments, so very often we would have sort of a configuration environment, all of the consultants are in, they're doing the setup specific for the customers. When it comes to e-commerce, there are slightly different ways to manage that and manage the progression of that data through. And there's some areas where actually we're doing some work still, and I'll talk about those later. But fundamentally, don't be scared of it. The e-commerce tool is an add-on to your normal retail license, for anyone who's going to ask me that question, because everyone does ask. But fundamentally, outside of that, it doesn't change the structure of the program. It doesn't change the structure of your requirements, or shouldn't give you any surprises where you have to consider your longer journey with it. Oh, so what I'm going to do, I'm now going to leave that because nobody wants death by PowerPoint. And I'm just going to go actually into the system. So just double checking. I don't know whether it looks like my screen has gone. Nope. Hang on, what's going on? So if I just share again. Not that one. That one. Right, so first thing I wanted to really show anyone who hasn't touched or seen e-commerce is what it really looks like within Lifecycle Services. So this is the screen that everyone's used to. You've built an environment. It could be any size. It could be a UAT size. When it comes to development sizes, actually, you can't, unless you talk to us, get a tier 1 machine like I have now with e-commerce added on. But I will talk and cover about environments actually later, because for anyone it might be useful information. But when you purchase that add-on, ultimately this is what happens. It gives you this segment here. So you've got everything else as you would expect and normal, but you can go into the manage settings. And this is where you manage those extra components I was just talking about. So this is your commerce scale unit. When you're on environments that you have more than one, they're just queued down. And this is where you can apply any extensions or any updates and just manage them really and make sure they're all up, running and happy. And then you have the second segment, which is your e-commerce site. So what you'll see is you only actually ever have one e-commerce site. And these are the two key links that you're going to use the most. You're going to use your site builder, which is ultimately actually even what your customers' business users are going to be. So anyone who's in charge of the content, the layout, the structure of their site, they're going to be majorly using the site builder. And the e-commerce site is just your front end link, your external link that you've got out. So if I go to the site builder, one thing I wanted to show is when you're in this screen, and one of the more common things I get asked is, well, okay, you've only got one e-commerce instance. So how can I have multiple websites? Because I have a customer that needs multiple. Well, you can. And that's where this comes in. So you can have and configure multiple sites, and each site you can actually link to a different online store that you've configured in the HQ. So within the HQ setup, you can say, okay, I'm going to have 5 online stores. I'm going to have different product hierarchies, different product categories, and fundamentally different products all routing into my product management tools and my financial tools, if you choose to have finance as well. And they can then be fronted in a different website. Once you then click into the site you want to manage, this is where you're going to find a bulk of your users. This is where they're going to ultimately live their lives. And this is their fundamental day in the life of your content users for your business. And this is where actually it's really key to sort of show people and show how easy it is. And I will start showing you how to do some updates further down, but I'll just talk to you around the site at the moment and show you what really happens. So within your site, the first place you always want to start really is the layout and the templates. So I don't have in the Composo any layouts saved, but a layout or a template is mandated for when you deploy a page, and this is your core structure. So all you want this is to keep that standard appearance across the different pages on your website, and it's how you manage it. So these are just core content areas and elements, which you then, if you made a change within these templates, it would then reflect across all the pages that started and were built from this template. Page fragments are very, to be honest, they're very similar to core components if you work in any other real tool. So for example, your header, that's going to be on pretty much every single page you do. Your footer, that's going to be on every single page you do. Your store selector, you can route through that from multiple locations. So these are elements you can do updates to, and those updates will be done en masse across all of your pages as well. So you can ultimately have that standard nature of your setup through the layout template and page fragments functions, which means that you can easily maintain that standard layout and image structure across the entire website rather than having to do that independently anywhere else. There's also, which I don't tend to spend a lot of time on, just managing your URL extensions, which you can link across. Then you also have your media library. And I will talk about this in more detail in a moment, just so we can get an understanding, because what you'll start seeing is, oh, this is a weird naming convention. Why are they there? I will talk to you about that and talk around that. And then you have the products, which is your core product hierarchy. So what you're going to see here, this is configuration that has been done within the HQ. So this is what your internal product management team are doing within the HQ, and they're running batch jobs. And what that does is it automatically updates your product hierarchy and all of the categories that you have within your e-commerce website. So you really want to make sure that the work that's being done here in your HQ is, to be honest, monitored and managed, because that's making sure you have that natural and intrinsic link between what you have available, what your product hierarchy needs to look like, and also how you're going to design the site, just for that ease of management and structure. There's one thing I do want to cover off, and just because this is what a lot of people tend to ask. In features, we have this thing called publish groups. Now, for anyone doing a project, these are really, really, really important. So people tend to say, okay, I work for, I don't know, ASOS. We want to do a Halloween sale, and we, as part of that, we want to rework our website. We want our site to look different. We want it to feel different. We want to have specific products come on offer, things like that. Within the publish groups, what basically you do is when you switch on this function, it enables you to create a publishing container. So you can go through the rest of this website, and rather than publishing the actual changes you're making to your production external facing website, you're publishing it and saving those changes to this group, to this container. And what you can do at that point is you can preview all of your changes. You can schedule them for release. So do you know what? On the 31st of December, I want this website to suddenly turn on and look like this and feel like this and have these changes. And that's how you manage that entire sort of rollout of a new offer, a new schedule, a new layout and structure in a controlled fashion en masse to your external audience. And it provides also a little bit of that, you know, we want to make changes, we want to see how they look, we want to see how they feel, we want to be able to use the site without actually changing anything on our production. Well, this is ultimately where it is. It's the publish group. Once you have it all and you make your changes and you set it up, you publish the changes to your publish group, which then means you can preview all of your changes, you can do some testing, you can click around, see and look how it feels. And then if you don't want to ever publish it, you don't want to ever formally schedule it for release, well, you can go back and make those changes. So this is a key piece of functionality that we're working on to enable that management of content whilst de-risking any changes going through to your production site. Also, the accessibility checker. This one, I think, is really topical, actually. What we've done within the accessibility checker is we go and basically check all of the pages you've created and just see if there's anything that we think, oh, maybe you should rethink about that. You know, have you got a lot of red? We know that that's a key issue for anyone who has, I don't know, issues with seeing different colours or they're colourblind. And what we do is we have that accessibility checker running on there, which you can switch on, and it will sort of highlight these things to you and say, oh, are you sure actually maybe you want to change it in this way or that way instead of doing it like that? Because then ultimately what you are allowing it is the system to give you a bit of a prompt to say, you could probably do this a little bit different. So making sure that it's available to set up. When it goes into channels, earlier I mentioned between your online store that you're configuring and the domain mapping. So here, when I built and deployed this site, I set my domain as fabricam.com and I set my language as English US. One thing I will pre-warn everyone about, just because I'm trying to be honest, is if you try and publish one of our Contoso environments or things like that, and you try and use a different language to English US, the translation between a number of the fields is the standard data is not quite great. So what you might find if you're using a different one to English US is that you start seeing it doesn't quite look right. And that's why it is the Contoso data is not quite there. But also here, what you can do is select map to a different AUN. And what this ultimately means is you can change which store you are actually linking this to. And these are, I've got in my HQ, I've got 3 online stores which I've configured and set up. When I built the page, I selected Fabricam Online that to another store. So this is enabling you that ease of configuration to do that. Naturally, you wouldn't give everyone access to do these sort of setups, and then that does go into the staff tab where we're talking about, well, who has what access. Everything we're talking about in e-commerce works natively with Azure Active Directory. So you need to, when you're talking to customers about e-commerce, really, really start thinking about how they're doing their identity management, because this ecom admin, what this actually is, this is an Azure Active Directory group. And so my account has been added to that Azure Active Directory group to say that I'm an administrator, and you can break that down. So you need to just be really conscious, like even when you're doing B2C, so when you're doing your checkout functions, you want to save a customer, that also has to use the native B2C configuration of Azure Active Directory. So when you go through the Contoso site and you save your account, you go through your checkout, you do have to then use the B2C configuration. So it's just things that I suppose you should be aware of, making sure when you're doing this site, you're selling this site, they're sort of key trip up points. And then in the general settings is where you can ultimately manage your cookies, manage any redirects that you've got up and running. So you don't have to worry too much about any of this. So what I want to do is talk about the images, which is what I mentioned to you, and how to manage the content. There is a lot of investment going on that we're doing when it comes to management of the photos and the image library. It's not necessarily as intuitive as we want to have with how the mapping between the e-commerce management site is and also the front end site. So what you end up having when you're in the front end site, if you have a product, what you would ultimately have is this naming convention that we're seeing here. This actually does directly route where that product is going to be used on the site. So when I do an upload media image and I've got some stock images that I can use, what you'll see is the first number is the product. The second is ultimately any categorization. So you can have any, when you're setting up the products, there's a number of different variations you can use. This is then the size. And then this is the configuration type. And then ultimately that's the core identifier. So what you'll see is these 3 or 4 images, they're all using the same product. But what we're seeing is a variant per product. And then this does not have anything outside of the full product ID down to the item type. And that's because this is your header image. So one of the gotchas that I have to pre-warn anyone, and what we're working on at the moment, is that when you're doing this and you're configuring this site, say I had a backpack and that was extra large. If I only uploaded these images today, so I wouldn't have one that had extra large in the size setting of the naming convention of the image itself, what that would do on the front end product description is it wouldn't natively then use the header photo or the top hierarchical photo to display to the customers. And we know that doesn't necessarily give you what you want. So that's what's being worked on at the moment to make sure if there isn't a specific image for each configuration type, because that's what's going on here. It's managing the naming convention to relate back to that type. So I always use the shoes, right? So I have a pair of heels, love my shoes, but I have the same product, but I can have it in pink or blue. I can have it in 4, 5, and 6 as sizes. And also I can have one with a bow and one without a bow. So what I ultimately would need in the product library is a picture that represents each variant of that same product. And that's massive overhead, right? If we've got, in example, we're using every configuration type of the and actually, do you really need a different picture for sizes 4, 5, 6, and 7? You don't. You can still use the same picture as long as it's the right color, because my color variant is correct. Obviously, that calculate, and we are hoping to get that changed quite soon. But it is just for a awareness that is something what that's then doing is ultimately asking me through this category, what do you want me to do with these images? And because we know for these products that we need to do some extra calculations going on in the background, and we need to do that extra cleverness in the background, we then have to tell the computer or tell the system, well, okay, we want you to do that specific level of cleverness. So we then would click product, because this is telling the system to actually read what that title of that page is, and also make sure that you're doing and publishing that. So we could say publish that media item, and that would go through, or we can upload it without publishing, because we can publish later. So we don't have to worry about that. With each image, there's a number of things really for us to look at and take note of. So every single image has a public URL. That's how the front end website understands where the image is. And also you can use these public URLs, for example, if you are, for example, get a new image for a favicon. So this is this picture up here that you would have highlighted on your tab. There wasn't a favicon category for upload. But what you can do in your page fragment is you can use that public URL to actually route that back through and say, okay, this is what I want as my favicon now. So there's also a couple of things that you can do. So alt text, for example, is you do need to be conscious of it, and this is where that disability awareness comes in. If you put data in there, so if I just uploaded one image, it would ask me to do that as mandatory. What it wants to do is it wants you to put something in there that will help anyone who hard of sight. So if they have any text reader or page reader software on their local machine, that will use the alt text to actually then read out what that image is for them. So it just makes it more accessible and makes it much more available. With the images, this is where you can manually publish them, or you can unpublish anything that has previously been published. And it's the central location really of everything to do with your products, but it's not the only place you can actually manage them. So if I go to the pages, because this is where your core content is, right? And this is where you can start making these specific changes that are going on within the site. And I want to click on my homepage. There's a lot that I need to show you here, because actually for me personally, I find it quite cool. Because everything I've shown you now, I think is quite intuitive, and the structure is very similar. The layout is very similar to what Dynamics is even within the HQ. So on this left-hand pane, you have your full hierarchy of everything that's in the image within the site. But actually, that's a bit nightmare, right? We don't want to have to use this. So what we have also is we have a preview panel. And if I click on something, that will take me exactly where it is in the hierarchy. And also it will give me the properties on the right-hand pane reflecting the area or component I've selected in. If I did want to go to a specific image, I could also navigate through this hierarchy as well if I knew where I really wanted to go. But both of those options are available to you to ultimately make the ease of use much better. When it comes to any pages, if we click show history, what you have the ability here is for everything you've published, you can actually undo that. You can review what's been done, and you don't then necessarily need to do that core management of it. So when you're doing your publications, and what I'll show you in a second, is you do want to make sure those comments are in there, because it enables you to have that audit and review. So rather than keep talking, we can go in and start making a few changes. So what I've got, as you've seen, I've got my core media library, and I've got my content, I've got my page, and I'm thinking, right, okay, what do I want to do? Well, realistically, I've decided I want to change this site. I want to make it a little bit, I don't know, more activity friendly. So what I've done, I've gone into the content block. And this is where I said you can actually manage these images somewhere else. So what we've got is a media picker, but the image I want isn't actually here. So rather than having to navigate back out to the media library and then come back in, I can upload a new item here and I can actually just select it from this. What that does is it gives me the information. So if I put here image 1, I can put the category. Now in this case, I'm putting the category as none, because actually there's nothing clever I need the system to do. I know exactly where I want it to go. It's not going to be reading from the title or any information about it. I don't really need to know a system to know or care other than the fact it's just a plain image. And also this is what I mean about the alt text. So what you could do is add the alt text that relates to the picture, and that then reads out the image, so it makes it a bit more inclusive for anyone who's using that software on their laptop or their computer. So here I've got now my image, and I'm just going to click OK. So what you'll see is it's updating this for me, so I can start actually seeing what I'm doing on the website. I don't have to go and publish anything. I haven't even saved this change. I could go and change it back. I could discard the edits. It's giving me that full control to see and feel the changes I'm making without actually doing anything. The other options I also have is if I had a particularly high quality image, I could then manage that within here, and also I could disable the lazy load if I wasn't so worried about the load time of the website. So there's a couple of things here that you can start doing to also manage your image content. And then what you'll see is we've got the heading. So these ultimately are your normal CSS. So the heading, the rich text that you're using, if you wanted to use some CSS overrides, you can do that. To enhance on the functionality, you can see here to do the look and feel for your image. So what I'm going to do is just going to update that. And obviously you can see, like I said, going back to CSS, you can manage your heading levels. So what I will do, and we'll go back because the carousel's been moving, what you'll see is it's updating this live for me. And it just really helps you see and visualize the changes you're making. You can go make additional changes. You can just really work on the site and the image that you're doing. And also you can manage the placement of the text of the image if you have a smaller image, and talk about the themes that you're using as well. So you can really make these adjustments to all of the different images on your sites. What I've decided I want to do is I want to save these changes. And then ultimately what I want to do is finish editing. And I want to say updated hero image. I don't know, apart from my terrible spelling, anyone who couldn't undertake this. You know, it's really the point is this is easy for anyone to do. You don't have to be technical. You don't have to have a huge amount of knowledge or experience. Realistically, it's making it such a user-friendly environment. And what you'll see, so I may have published those changes, which would be no different if I was just doing it to a publishing group, but it hasn't made them public on the Fabricam website. So if I go to the website now and refresh them, I've made those changes, I've saved those changes, but actually in actual fact, those haven't been made live. They're not there. And that's because they're pending now. So I've saved them, they're there, the system knows that I've made this change, but it's not pushed it out to my front end website. To do that, I can then publish this, because ultimately what we've got in the background is pretty much my UAT or my stock management, where I could have made a couple more changes and stacked them up. Or like I said, I could have done the publishing group, recognized, and I want to publish them in 2-3 days time. Then when I go back to my website, what I'll see is I've got my update. I've done exactly what I wanted to do. I've made that change. I've had the management, the review. I've managed to talk around and see what I've done, whilst at the same time also protected my customers and had that easy look and feel. The level of changes you can make is anything really. So I could say, okay, for my carousel, I no longer want certain elements of the carousel. So if I go back into the edit function, I can start cloning it to have an additional content block. So I could have 4. What I could ultimately do is remove a couple of these content blocks, swap them around, share it to make it an actual page fragment to use on multiple pages of sites. And each of these text blocks, I can go and change. I can have a look and say, okay, where do I want to do? What do I want to change this as? And where do I ultimately want to get in? So I can start making any changes and saying, now, it's more about really in the focus and the core design principles we're trying to make is to try and make website management simple, to try and make content management simple, because it's not always been that way. And we really want to help people understand and see that the solution in e-commerce as it is today is really allowing, so if I do this, really allowing anyone in the business, you know, outside of those with necessarily a technical mindset, to start being able to take on these responsibilities. So what you'll see now, if we go into the history, is you'll see that this has been checked in, but it's not been published. Whereas what we've got here is my updated hero image. Well, I've published that. And you can start reverting out some of these publications, and you can cancel any of these check-ins and you can discard it. So you don't have to really be a rocket scientist, and that's more the thing. And when it comes to your pages and your page management and your product management, when you're creating the new templates, well, using the existing templates, sorry, and creating the new pages, the more, I suppose, experienced staff, the more technical part behind it would be actually in doing the templates themselves. Because then as a business user, if I was managing my content or I was managing my physical front end visibility to my external customers, I can then use these standard templates to give me my baseline and then add the page name and page URL, and really I'm good to go. And that's really the core element of what we're seeing here, is just making sure we have the isolation and segregation, whilst also having that ease of use and ability for anyone to manage, see and audit these changes, and also move them between environments. When it comes to, I suppose, and one of the key questions I have is, what about if I've built this configuration in my UAT environment and I've not built it in my production environment? Is there a way for my e-commerce setup to be moved between environments? Because for my HQ, we know how to move configuration through either entities or through database backups. When it comes to any customizations, you have data packages. Even if you're extending on your e-commerce, you're using XML, you're using a number of sites, you can manage and migrate that across. Today, as much as we don't want to admit it, there's not a way to have this configuration, these pages, these templates, exported and imported into a separate environment. And it's something that we're aware of. And although we have got some segregation of saying, okay, well, you have this isolation when you're managing your content, it's something that we're also looking into that's under heavy investment, just to say, okay, we recognize that's probably something that you're going to want, and it's something that you're going to need to do as an organization, especially when you're doing your initial go live. Once a customer's in production, it's different. You would probably start using the standard content management settings and setup that are always there. But as of today, it's not quite there. It is something that we're working on though. And really, I suppose for everyone, if you do have comments or you've worked with some of the alternative, or you're working currently on the headless engine, so you're using a different e-commerce tool, I suppose what all I would say to you is definitely have a look and have a play. There are a number of e-commerce sites for the front end you can use to click around and show what you've done. And if you haven't been as part of one of the demos at the moment, literally drop me a mail, because we're running e-commerce in a day sessions which you'll have to listen to me all day, I'm sorry, but you know, we give you your own environment, you get to play, you get to do everything that I'm talking about now. So if you've not had access to that and been able to understand and get your hands to grips on how these environments work and how they integrate, literally drop me a message, because I can drop you on the queue and we can get you sorted in the next couple of months to go in and have a play. When it comes to environments, they're a bit tricky. When it comes to your development machines, or what's sort of more commonly known as a tier 1 machine for finance and operations, there isn't really a way as of today to get your e-commerce setup running, but that is going to change. So as of October, which is the current plan, no promises, you know what it's like, all the T's and C's on that. From October, we'll be releasing a new tiered environment, basically, and it's basically going to be a 1.5 tier, which will be a Microsoft hosted environment that partners can basically get at cost rather than, you know, any additional money. So it's fairly cheap. And what that will have is it will have the e-commerce arm on it. It will just be a smaller version of what you get in your tier 2 UAT instances. And that's because with the complicated infrastructure that we're getting with finance and operations now, it's too much for us to be able to provide on a customer managed subscription. It's too complicated and very expensive, so you wouldn't want it even if we could. And what that will mean is you start getting these extra things like, you know, Power BI, embedded Power BI. It's been our headache for ages. The e-commerce, all these different add-ons that we're rolling out that really help elevate what used to be finance and operations. All of that will then become available in these tier 1.5, so you can start using those smaller, cheaper boxes, but also getting access to these additional tools to do those POCs and that workaround. So the options are there. And if you get stuck, like I said, and you're not getting the access for anything from learning how it works, doing some pre-sales, you want even as a customer just to take a look, literally just shout out, because the stuff we can sort out, the stuff we are sorting out for people. And really my job is to try and make this as accessible and open to everyone as possible, so you can have a go to play. And then if you have feedback, also let me know, because unfortunately for the product group, I've got a direct route into them and I keep telling them stuff that I think they need to fix. So it means that you guys get a perfect opportunity to also start providing some of that feedback and also support on what our roadmap's going to look like and what the prioritization is. But more than that, I suppose I'll open up to Q&A and see if there's anything anyone has to ask or say. And sorry, I don't think I've braved through the entire 45 minutes I've been talking.
Thanks, Kaila. Thanks. A really interesting session today, and also seeing those settings again, it actually refreshes my mind as well, because I was one of the attendee for Commerce in a Day, and I strongly recommend everyone to attend that. It's a brilliant session. Kaila, Viresh, Martin, they literally put soul to it. Like, you know, they really do work hard and give you a chance to play around with the e-commerce environment. So I definitely recommend. And thanks for touching that topic, Kaila, because like that was one of the question was asked where in the session Viresh presented as well. So definitely there is like, you know, we have audience who's interested in those kind of events. Just looking at like in a chat window, not seeing. Oh, there is a question. Shiva, you have a question about, hi Kaila, question around media library. What was the question?
Hi Kaila.
Hello.
This is the question around the media library. So if I wanted to display the images for the modern POS or Cloud POS, do I have to mandatorily use the media library? Can I not use the images from the release product and then sync back to POS?
Yeah, so this is another area that we're having ongoing conversations about. So at the moment, with actually the product images, there's no link between the e-commerce tool and the HQ/POS system. I completely acknowledge, you know, why would you want to manage that twice? You wouldn't. It's not there. I can't also say it's on a hot topic of what the R&D team are also looking at and working on. We know it's not necessarily intuitive to do that, but also if they do that, they need to consider actually if someone's doing also a headless commerce offering, so they want to bring in, I don't know, their own e-commerce site. So it's a bit more of a complicated question, but definitely one we're aware. If you come across, I don't know, from when you're talking about it, when you're working with it, any strong resistance or strong feedback, absolutely let me know, because it's things like that help build the business case to say, actually, we should prioritize this much more and also get that moving. But yeah, as of today, it's sort of something we know, and unfortunately an integration that's not there. But something that, you know, we are aware of, and I suppose we're just waiting for people to sort of give us the say-so to say, come on, please do this. This is a big problem for us.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. Ravinda saying very informative session. Thanks, Ravinda. And I'm also monitoring YouTube. There are no questions on it. Yeah. So just another reminder to everyone, like, if you do have a question, please feel free to ask. We have 12 minutes before we kickstart on the next session. And we don't want to hold up Kaila too long on this special day. So I don't want to repeat again before I get told off. Shiva, you have got hand raised. Do you have any more further questions?
Sorry, Atlee, previous one. Sorry, I'm just taking back.